I'm technically calling the Safety General Government meeting to order. This is a public safety meeting, and I know there's a misconception it might be a public hearing, but it's a public safety meeting, which obviously the public is welcome to, and it's shown up in great force, which is good. That's why there's no sign-up sheet. It's not a public hearing, but obviously questions will be answered, and you can raise your hand and speak, and we'll try to do it in orderly and quick fashion as possible. We have 12 other items on our agenda for the meeting, so we ask that you keep it brief. And there will be other public meetings and comments to follow when necessary. So I'd like to turn this over to Greg Swansea, our economic development leader for Kingston, and he will introduce what you're about to see and discuss things briefly. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Well, yes, I just wanted to give a very brief background on this project. With the project, the Building a Better Broadway project, it actually came to have that name, but it was originally the Broadway Corridor Conceptual Design Project. So in other words, it's conceptual design for Broadway, and it's looking at how can we transform Broadway, which is something a lot of people were asking for. Can we transform Broadway when someone comes off the thruway and, on 587 come down Broadway? How can we make sure that they have an experience that makes them want to come back? Also, how can we make it safe for everyone? Bicycles, but also pedestrians. How can we make the traffic flow smoothly? How can we accommodate the needs on the corridor? Public transportation. So there are a lot of solutions that we're looking for in this, not just one type of user. And it really is aimed at also, I live in Kingston. I'm a resident here, and I want a place that I want to live. So that's also what we're looking for here. It is about businesses, but it's also about the people that live here. We have seen an increasing usage of the corridor, obviously, and there's been more activity all the time. I know that one thing, though, that I get worried about is, well, if I ride my bike, it's in the street, and sometimes I do, and that's not a safe thing. I also notice a lot of bicycles are on the sidewalks, and that's not safe either, so there must be something we can do about that. And that's really, the intent here is to find solutions. I hope everyone is aimed in that direction, so we really respond to all the users. I just want to go back also, when did this all start? Back in January of 2013, there was an application that we submitted to the Ulster County Transportation Council. We, meaning the City of Kingston, asked Ulster County to help us out. We wanted to look at Broadway because we had people asking, how can we improve it, how can we transform Broadway? So we submitted to the Ulster County Transportation Council this idea, the name I just mentioned, Broadway Corridor Conceptual Design Project, and it was accepted. So by September of 2013, there actually was an RFP going out, a request for proposals for an engineering firm to help us with this, and so on. And I want to tell you that this particular project actually catalyzed millions of dollars in grant money because Ulster County was willing to step up and do this for us. So we got Transportation Enhancement Program money from the United States Department of Transportation, but also the NYSERDA Cleaner Greener Communities grant provided money also. And so we're doing a traffic signalization study with this. We're going to improve the traffic signalization, which will make for better flows of traffic, but also the enhancement. So a lot of this is about also the sidewalks. Where are the trees going to be? Benches, that kind of enhancement. And it's a lot more than, a lot of this is kind of evolved into maybe just talking about parking or bicycles, but it's much more than that. Very important project for the city, so we have to move it forward. Anyway, since 2013, VHB, the engineering firm VHB, who you'll hear from now soon, was contracted by May of 2014. We were doing sidewalks by late May, kickoff meeting in June of 2014, public meeting in November of 2014, another public meeting in August of 2015. So there has been a process, I want you to know that too, where this has been out on the web. There have been ways that people could access it. Obviously, as we get closer and closer to a concept, a specific concept, people are looking at that more and more closely. So this is, tonight, here's the culmination of that and receiving a lot of feedback. And believe me, we're listening. We're out there talking to people. We're trying to find the best concept possible. And the next step is, I want to just get the speakers up here. The next step is, VHB is the engineering firm doing this right now, right? The concept. We have also engaged another engineering firm, Green and Peterson. They're the ones that will do the design and the engineering. In other words, this is concept we're talking about now. The next step is design and engineering. That's when we decided, well, should this tree, where should it go? Some businesses might say, don't put that tree there, it blocks my window. Others might say, we need some benches here because, you know, for whatever reason. Or, you know, we'll look at where the amenities should go. But that's coming up. We're not there yet. We're getting a concept down here, what we're talking about now. More time, more input into the future. Please, I hope you heard me say that. You will have more opportunity to comment as we go into the future of this. Anyway, so now I just want to turn it over to Dennis Doyle, the planning director for Ulster County. And what a great partnership with the county that the city has had. We really appreciate all the effort the county has had, you know, through this process and any others. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Greg. Do I need a mic? Can you hear me without a mic? Yeah. Okay. I would prefer, if I don't have to use one, I prefer not to. It allows me to walk around. I got a bad back, so I walk around a little bit. It was funny when I heard Greg say in the beginning, sort of like, where did this all start? It reminded me of a situation that I was in many years ago when my mother and father had their 50th wedding anniversary. And one of the questions that my brother asked them was, when did this all start? And we got some answers to that, but what he did was, he pulled out of his pocket a piece of paper, and he had all of these great quotes and pictures and things that my mother and father had done for the last 50 years. And I was sitting in the audience, and of course I was next. And so I promptly stuck a napkin in my pocket and walked up and pulled something out of my pocket that was completely blank. And I assure you tonight I didn't pull something out of my pocket that's completely blank. I do have a few things to say, and I'm not talking off the cuff. But I thought that that story was interesting because it gives you a sense about being able to be ready to deal with certain issues that come up. And one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was we got a sense of how we got here relative to the Transportation Council. And the Transportation Council is a creature of the federal government. It essentially is required to do certain kinds of transportation planning work and programs funds for something called transportation planning, but it also programs funds for implementation. We're fortunate, I think, in this instance, and rather unique, to be doing a comprehensive look at the Broadway corridor on a concept level where we have money right behind it to implement. Most times when you do this kind of work, you find that you're doing a conceptual plan. And years later, sometimes as many as 10 years later, you finally get around to essentially finding the necessary federal dollars to implement. So the city is extremely fortunate to have behind this document essentially the ability to go through to start implementation. So a couple things I wanted to talk to you about. One was the guiding principles in terms of what we started and how we started this program. We started with the guiding principles that the project was about reviving, restoring, and revitalizing the Broadway corridor. And it was to improve traffic flow and transit, also to connect the projects to the neighborhoods, as well as deal with bicycle issues and safety issues. We originally called this study something called a CAP, Brian, is it? A circulation and wayfinding plan. But when we start talking about things like that, we recognized that we actually needed a name that could resonate with the community. We began with a name that was called Bringing Back Broadway. I think, unfortunately, the city of Los Angeles had trademarked that name. So we got a quick call from the city of Los Angeles, and they told us, you can't bring back Broadway. But we came up with something called Building a Better Broadway, and that name is sort of stuck through the planning process. One of the things you should know is that every time the Transportation Council does a plan, we plan with the community, not for it. So one of the things that we always established is transportation or a technical advisory committee, or TAC, We did so in this instance, and I'd like to thank those folks and ask them to stand up and sort of be acknowledged for the work that they've done. So if members of the TAC would please stand up and be acknowledged for the work that they've done. They kept us on board. They helped to guide us in terms of what the city needs and keep us on track with respect to what the goals were. I'd also like to thank essentially members of my staff, or members of the Transportation Council, who are here tonight that did all the yeoman's work to make sure that the project came in on time and we were able to move through this process in an orderly fashion. Dave Stoss is here tonight. He's a transportation planner for the office. David. And Brian Slack is a principal transportation planner for the office, and he was project manager. I'd also like to thank the consultants of VHB and People for Places who were engaged for the project. They went above and beyond in terms of their ability to essentially understand the community and to respond to the issues that came up during the time. Last but not least, I want to thank the public. Your participation during the public meetings, your participation during the comment periods that were available to this plan made the plan more responsive, better able to essentially anticipate the needs of the community, and also be able to be there so that when we come back and we look at how we got from point A to point B, there's a body of comments that says these are the things that we need to be concerned about. We've made many changes to the plan on the basis of those comments, and we want to thank you, and we really appreciate all of your participation from every side, from every angle, from every individual, from the businesses to the elected officials, all of you. Thank you very much. One of the things that I also wanted to talk about was how the plan was grounded in other plans. The City of Kingston is very fortunate in the fact that it has a series of other plans that set out some guiding principles in terms of how you do land use transportation planning and put them together. One of those plans is the city's Complete Streets program, which was adopted by the city. The other is a more recently documented work that's being done and looked at by the Common Council right now, and it's the draft comprehensive plan for the city. That draft comprehensive plan has a section in it which calls for a new land use approach to Midtown. Within that, I'm going to paraphrase somewhat, there is a series of recommendations for what the Midtown should be. It says, the recommendations here are complete street enhancements that strengthen multimodal connections and improve walkability, visual and physical enhancements to the streetscape and buildings along Broadway, mixed use, adaptive reuse, and infill development, and critical parks and recreation investments, all of which are needed to transform Midtown from an outdated commercial artery into a socially and economically vibrant place where people in the city and surrounding regions want to live, shop, work, and be entertained. We took that as our mantra as we essentially moved through this project and made sure that our recommendations were touching back on those things that were talked about in the comprehensive plan. The plan's recommendations summarized are traffic signal integration throughout the corridor, pedestrian improvements and turning restrictions at key intersections, especially those with high accident locations, creating additional public spaces and improvements through roadway and intersection realignments, additional landscaping throughout the corridor, and yes, a phased approach to adding bicycle facilities within the corridor, beginning in the western portion and then extending into the eastern portion as the issues of concern with respect to parking and business access are addressed. Why bicycles? Well, for one, the city has a policy of complete streets which calls for it. For two, when we observed the use in the corridors, we saw that there was some significant bicycle use within the corridor. And three, when you look at the census data that's available for those neighborhoods that are joining the corridor, what you find is about 17% of those households lack an automobile. but as well as the fact that there was a number of comments and concerns relative to the bicycle facilities, there are more important considerations here with respect to this plan. The existing situation in the corridor needs to change. When you look at the corridor itself, what you find is that it has about 4 times the statewide average of accidents compared to other similar corridors. What you also know is that when you do the kinds of things that we're proposing to this corridor with respect to lane reductions and signal integration, accident rates drop between 19 to 30%. So there are real reasons to look at the corridor and look at it and make some changes. Not only as it relates to safety, but also it relates to the city's own efforts to make sure that this becomes a vibrant corridor. I thank you for your time. I'm going to turn it over to our consultants who will go into the details of what we're proposed. And hopefully from there, we can see, we'll have a final comments from Bob Dennison, who's also with the consulting team, with respect to where we are now and what we have to do next. So John, you're up. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. I'd also like to thank the TAC, the Technical Advisory Committee, without whose assistance we couldn't have got to this point, and to Dennis and his staff, also whose assistance was invaluable, and to acknowledge my colleague Bob Dennison, former Chief Engineer for New York State Department of Transportation and long-time city resident who has been instrumental in guiding this project to where it is today. I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to speak to you, and I'm grateful for your time and for the committee's time this evening. This, I think, is a once-in-a-generation opportunity for the City of Kingston to take what was formerly a bustling corridor and now which has seen better times, and to turn it into something new and exciting and cutting edge. And throughout the process, we have worked hard with staff and worked with the public to envision and to try to achieve what will be a new and exciting corridor. And I'd like to just, I guess, take you quickly through the process and what we found. And I'll get down on one knee, I'm not proposing. So the goals of the project were to renew, restore, and revive Broadway. It's an investment in the corridor. It's to improve pedestrian and bicycle safety, aesthetics, transit and traffic flow. It's also to reconnect the corridor to the surrounding neighbourhoods for both pedestrians and cyclists, and to revitalise and reinvest in the corridor. So those are the goals that were handed to us at the start of the project. We've had a very extensive public involvement process, which has brought the project back and forth and brought it ultimately to where it is today. Safety is, I guess, job one. There have been 369 crashes in the study area in a 3-year period. As Dennis mentioned, that's as much as 4 times the expected rate. There were 15 pedestrian accidents and 12 bicycle accidents. So the number one goal is to try and reduce accidents and increase safety. Speed is an issue along the corridor. Along the western section of the corridor, the operating speed is 38 miles per hour. That's in the 4-lane section down through Greenkill Avenue. And then east of Greenkill Avenue, the operating speed is 29 miles an hour, considerably less. That's in the 2-lane section of the corridor. And on the right there, you see a figure which shows the likelihood that you'll be killed if you're struck at a speed of anywhere from 0 to 46 miles per hour, depending on your age. And what you can see from that, the gold line on the left, which is the operating speed at the east end of the corridor, the chances that you'll be killed range from about 5% if you're a younger person to 22% if you're over 65. And when the speed increases from 29 to 38 miles an hour, that increases from 5% to about 10% for younger people, and from about 25% to about 40% for older people, people over the age of 65. So as you can see, reducing speed along the western portion of the corridor is a very important issue. One of the easiest ways to do this is to implement a road diet, because on the western portion of the corridor, where you have 2 lanes per direction, those people with a heavy foot have the opportunity to pass people with a slower foot. If you've got a single lane per direction with a center turn lane, then you can only really go as fast as the slowest person, and that moderates the speed, which is evident from the data that shows the east end of the corridor operating speed is considerably less than the west end of the corridor. Other safety improvements that will come with reinvestment in the corridor is switching out these signals. Right now, many of the signals along the corridor have 8-inch lenses, and they would be replaced with 12-inch lenses. And replacing 8-inch lenses with 12-inch lenses has been shown to reduce right-angle accidents by as much as 47%. It would also replace the existing hand-manned countdown signals with hand-manned signals with countdown signals where you are told how much time you have left to complete the crossing. And studies have shown that with countdown signals, pedestrian injuries have been reduced by as much as 52%. The project will also bring accessibility improvements, such as curb ramps. In the top photograph, you can see there aren't even curb ramps at all. The bottom photograph, there are no tactile pads to advise the blind that they're at the edge of the crosswalk. You can go up and down the corridor, and you'll find location after location where there are not tactile curb ramps. In fact, I think the only place that there are tactile curb ramps is at the intersection of Chester Street with Broadway, and there I think it's only on the east side of the intersection. So that would be a benefit, a safety benefit and an accessibility benefit. In addition, the project would bring the consistent and proper signing of unsignalized crosswalks. So there are currently 3 unsignalized crosswalks on the corridor. The bottom one is at Andrews Street, the middle one is at Field Court by UPAC, and the top one, I can't remember where the top one is, to be honest with you, but you guys probably know.
Down Street, Broadway.
Down Street. So, you know, you'd be hard-pressed to find a sign. There is one sign at the bottom in the middle of the road, but other than that, you'd be hard-pressed to find a sign advising you that this was a pedestrian crosswalk. The standard signs on the top left there, you have it on both sides of the road, indicating that it is a crosswalk, and there's a photograph, oops, I'm sorry, there's a photograph on the bottom right there, a bottom left that shows a signed crosswalk. And one of the other measures that we would be looking to do would be to introduce additional crosswalks at suitable locations, such as on the east side of Field Court, where when people come out from an event at UPAC, they can cross to parking. Another measure that would improve safety and convenience would be to upgrade the signing. The middle photograph there, if you can read that, that says Grand Street. On the photograph on the right, you can see it says Cornell Street and Municipal Parking. Those shots are pretty up close. You're 10 or 20 feet away. If you're driving a car, it's kind of hard to see those signs until you get there. So if you upgrade to larger, more legible font, it'll make the decision-making process easier, and it'll allow more time for eyes on the street. We're also proposing to install no turn on red signs at key locations, at high accident locations, to improve safety where it doesn't compromise capacity. Bicycles. The question is, how did we get to where we got? Well, there are a couple of answers. The first one is this was the Green Line study, and there was a recommendation that bike lanes be evaluated both on the east end of the corridor and on the west end of the corridor. A key to this is in revitalizing the corridor. There are 3 potential trails contemplated coming into the area. The Walcott Valley Rail Trail, there's the Kingston Point Rail Trail, and there's the U&D corridor. So the concept was to connect all 3 trails to promote activity in the area so that people who live on the outskirts could drive to a trail, park, and cycle into town with their family, enjoy the benefits of the businesses along Broadway, and people who live right off Broadway could in turn get on their bicycles and cycle out to wherever they wanted to, down to the river and whatnot. And as has been alluded to, there have been studies that show that providing increased bicycle opportunities increase economic benefits. One of the key issues that was initially brought up by the public was that the users of the trails with their children would like to see facilities of a similar level. So if you have a protected facility on the trails and you come into Broadway, you don't want to go onto regular bike lanes where you're right next to cars with your children. You won't feel safe. That is easier to accommodate on the western section of the corridor, where the road diet will free up the space to do it without eliminating parking. But on the eastern portion of the corridor, it would require the loss of parking along the south side of Broadway. So phase one of the plan basically has a separated bike lane from Liberty Street to Pine Grove Avenue. And then it will, from there, the bicycle connection will take Sharrows and go on Prince Street, Hasbrook Avenue, Vauxhall and Jansen Street to the Kingston Point Rail Trail. Ultimately, once the school relocates its drop-off activity on Broadway at Kingston High School to the rear of the facility, and when parking has been evaluated further, the goal is to extend the separated bike lane to truly connect the three contemplated trails in the neighborhood. And so what that would do, this is looking from the Greenkill Avenue Bridge west, it would take basically the 4-lane section of Broadway, it's actually 3 lanes here, and it would convert it to a bike lane, separated from traffic by parking, and then you would have a turn lane so that turning vehicles would not slow the progression of through traffic. In addition to accommodating bicycles, reinvesting in the corridor also means investing in quality of life issues such as placemaking, so that when the businesses on Broadway have customers, people will walk from business to business and feel like Broadway is a place that they would like to stroll along and just see what's happening, or maybe buy an ice cream or a hot dog somewhere. And in addition to, placemaking will involve both replacement of sidewalks, upgrading of sidewalks and lighting fixtures, planting and landscaping. There are also opportunities to make some public spaces. In the top left corner of this picture, you see no man is an island, but apparently this island is an island. It's at Henry Street, and while it has some pretty shrubbery, it's kind of isolated from everywhere else. So the concept was to recapture the right turn lane there. On the bottom, you can see the conceptual plan, and reconnect the island to the sidewalk so that it would be more user-friendly, and you would replace the right turn lane on the left side of the island. A similar opportunity is available. The photograph on the bottom right shows you the expanse of the intersection that is Broadway with Pine Grove Avenue and Grand Street. So the concept there is to take the northbound approach of Pine Grove Avenue and turn it into the intersection. This will shorten crosswalks, making it a safer intersection, and also provide some new open space adjacent to the right-of-way. A number of the sidewalks in the area, while they are the classic Kingston bluestone, are starting to show their age, and so this is an opportunity to replace the sidewalk with aesthetically appeasing either bluestone or brick or some other materials, and to provide street trees and street lighting and street furniture and bicycle facilities, all of which will and bus shelters, I might add, all of which will make the corridor a much more appealing, accessible and enjoyable place. One of the items that came up a number of times during the public review process was the selection of the type of trees. The preferred type of tree would be one that provided a canopy that provided shade in the summer and shelter from the occasional rainstorm. Selection of the trees is important so that you don't compromise utility lines and underground utilities, but this is an important element of the plan. The photo on the bottom left, you also see signing for a pedestrian crosswalk, another element of the plan. So the question was raised, if we're going to have a road diet on the western section of Broadway, how will the corridor operate? We have run extensive analyses of the corridor from Liberty Street to Delaware Avenue, where we took the existing traffic volumes in the peak hour in the afternoon, increased them by 25%, envisioning that the corridor revitalization and the comprehensive plan goals are successful and that traffic activity increase. And by replacing the antiquated signals which operate independently and not in unison with state-of-the-art signals, you can create a window as you go down the corridor at about 25 miles per hour, which frankly is probably about the right speed that you would want to go down the corridor because of parking activities and pedestrian activities and loading activities and all of the other activities that you would have in a busy downtown area. And you can get a 35-second window in either direction if you proceed at that moderate rate of speed, and so you get good progression of traffic. Our analysis of the before and after conditions with the road guide indicate that stops will be reduced by 10% because of the coordination and progression of traffic. Delays associated with stops will be reduced by 33%. Person hours saved in the peak hour is 103 hours. The average progression speed on Broadway is actually increased from 8 miles per hour to 16 miles per hour because you're not stopping at every other signal. Improved progression leads and fewer stops leads to reduced fuel consumption, reduced from 9.5 miles per gallon to 7.3 miles per gallon, and reduced carbon dioxide emissions from 21 kilograms per hour to 16 kilograms per hour in the peak hour. Parking was also an important issue, and the improvements that we have recommended, including some bus stops and curb bump outs to shorten pedestrian crosswalk in the west end of the corridor in phase 1 of the project, will reduce the number of parking spaces if implemented by 13 at that location. On the graph there you can see the green is the number of spaces provided, the blue is the number of spaces provided with the implementation of the plan, and the yellow is the number of parked cars observed when the surveys were conducted. On the right side of the screen you can see phase 2, which is intended to be implemented once the city has conducted some additional parking evaluations to ensure that parking will not be a significant impact. Another issue that we reviewed at some length during the process was how to accommodate emergency vehicles and the maintenance of the facilities during the winter. The proposed design for the bike lanes, and I might add that the type of bike lanes decided really is a function of the striping rather than anything else. It's a question of where you put the lines on the road to get what you want, which is why what we're proposing at this point is starting at the north side, there would be the separated bike lane, then there would be parking, then there would be a travel lane in one direction, center turn lane, travel lane in the other direction. What that means from a maintenance perspective is that when there's a snow emergency, the cars get off the street and the road and the bike lanes, the parking, are all plowed at the same time. And from an emergency vehicle perspective, we have evaluated the various intersections and are proposing, if implemented, a number of measures including moving stop bars back by about 20 feet, or widening turn radii at key intersections, or eliminating 1 or 2 parking spaces to ensure that emergency vehicles and school buses will continue to be able to make the turns onto and off of Broadway as needed. And that basically brings me to the conclusion of my portion of this presentation. And Bob, I guess if you want to conclude, then we'll have a few questions. Thank you.
Good job, John. Thank you very much. Do I need this, or can I just talk? I'll try just talking. If you can't hear me, let me know.
Better with the microphone, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Let me give you a little background. I've lived in Kingston 28 years, so I'm not a native, but I've been here a while. And I ride my bicycle on Broadway when weather allows in the early mornings, and it's scary, but that's another. So the whole bicycle issue comes close to home. I just want to say a couple things about the process. This is an innovative and progressive solution to a road diet, to the Broadway corridor. It's similar to what was done in Raymond Avenue with Vassar. It's similar to what we've done at Marist. The results can be dramatic. And so the recommendation of the Technical Advisory Committee, and that's who's making the recommendation. We as consultants are simply advising them, I think is courageous, and I think it should be considered seriously. The next phase is the detailed design phase. There'll be public hearings, there'll be design reports, there'll be approvals by funding agencies, and that'll all be exciting as it moves forward. I know it's already started. There will be some discussions about whether this conforms to standards, and it does conform to some standards, but it doesn't conform to other standards. So there'll be approval processes that'll have to go through to make sure that it gets done, and if they choose to go this way, and that it it's can be approved by everybody. I'm sure that it can be. John made one interesting point. I know bicycling and bicycle lanes are a big issue here, and there's lots of people on both sides in the room. The question about bicycles and bicycle lanes in this project is simply about striping. John said that, and he's right. It's how you stripe the roadway. It's not going to affect the sidewalk improvements. It's not going to affect the trees or the plantings or the street furniture or the signal operations. It's just a matter of how you stripe it. And that issue can be discussed more during the detailed design phase. But notwithstanding that, the recommendation of the TAC is for a separated bicycle way, which has already been done in New York City. It's been done in Syracuse. It's an interesting solution. That's really all we've got to say. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Dennis, I don't know if we're... I yield to the chair.
If anyone has questions, just raise your hand and fire away. Any of the gentlemen that spoke will be happy to answer any questions right now.
Thank you. My question is more, in the city of Kingston, we've recently installed multiple locations now, these improved traffic pads just to basically signal the traffic.
What you're saying,
Can you have the microphone?
Microphone!
If you can use the microphone, we'd be able to hear you. Okay.
Thank you. Brian Session, the Alderman from the Second Ward. And I was asking him, we have in the city of Kingston recently, uptown in the Eastchester bypass, we've been replacing traffic signals with new modern ones which use integrated pads in the street to better signal and flow of traffic. So I was just curious, on the Broadway, when the phase one comes in, how far do they intend to extend the signals? And you went over some of the obvious improvements on it, but
the signals for the whole length of the project, the signaling, my understanding of GPI's contract, is that correct? The whole 0.8 of a mile. And they'll fully actuated traffic signals is what you're talking about and what they've installed. In essence, they sense vehicles, they sense vehicle cues, they're solid state controllers. That will be the standard, that will be what's installed with the new project. So they'll be fully actuated, solid state traffic signals.
Phase one will take the entire project.
Phase one will do the whole chord.
Any other questions?
I have a few questions for you. Was there a traffic count done on the street before you decided to eliminate a lane?
Yes.
What is the traffic count? Roughly
Off the top of my head.
anyone?
It's about 800 vehicles an hour.
800
Sure.
vehicles per hour. Yeah.
Because New York State Department of Transportation actually lists the traffic on the corridors between 4 points of interest of 61,469 vehicles. If you don't believe me, I'll prove it. But actually, I can tell you that there between Elmendorf Street and Henry Street, the Department of Transportation, which has road counters already installed, shows 21,095 vehicles per day. Okay, that's number one. Number two is you're proposing to eliminate a lane right under the underpass. Okay, is that correct? Under the bridge?
Actually, it's interesting because under the bridge is where traffic volumes are highest.
Okay.
And that's because there's few places to cross the railroad, so traffic in the surrounding area gets funneled underneath.
Great.
And right now, there is one lane eastbound and 1/2 lanes westbound. It's a wide lane, there's not much striping. So what we're proposing is one lane eastbound, one lane westbound with a center turn lane, effectively no change under the bridge.
I'm not sure how the math works on that, but what I will say is that you consider the proposal that RUPCO is putting forth to build a 5-story apartment complex in Billy. Don't you think that that's going to increase the traffic significantly in that corridor. So don't you think eliminating a lane there would have any major effect? So you mentioned people are going to die from getting hit by a car. I think people are going to die from waiting in traffic before that happens, because you're going to increase the amount of vehicles, number one, and you're also going to increase or decrease the flow of traffic. So I'm a little concerned that you stated 800 vehicles an hour. I find that to be very low, unless the Department of Transportation is wrong, but I think you mentioned your chief partner was from the Department of Transportation, so hopefully you can verify.
Yeah, we've done pretty extensive traffic counts along the corridor.
This came right from the Department of Transportation. I mean, literally.
Yes, that same number is in our report.
Well, it's not 800 an hour, then, so I don't know if the math makes sense there, but that's a significant amount of vehicles. So I'm just concerned by that, because you're going to increase that. I mean, you talk about safety, you talk about public safety, you talk about all these things, but don't look at practicality. Because I have a name for this project. It should be called Building a Better Broadway, because Mike Hines said so. Or Building a Better Broadway? Question mark? Because there seems to be a lot of questions that nobody wants to answer.
No, you might want to spend, you can spend some time with us. We'll go through the report with you, with the data in it, so that you have a real picture.
Don't present it to me, present it to the public. I don't need to know.
It's
I already know.
It's available to the public.
Well, then they should ask the questions to be aware, because there are 60,000 cars between 4 points of interest on Broadway. Eliminating a lane and adding bike lanes, if you mentioned you didn't even know the intersection was. Have you ever been on Broadway? I've never seen that many bikes. The bike season is 3 months out of the year. Traveling is 12 months out of the year. I believe traffic is more important than riding a bike. That's my opinion, and I think you're going to create a problem through attempting to solve that doesn't exist.
Thank you.
Can you identify yourself, sir?
My name is Matt Colangelo.
And Matt, just so that you understand, eliminating a lane of traffic on the 4-lane section of Broadway was not something that was taken lightly. We did extensive traffic counts. We increased the traffic volumes by 25%. We looked at the analyses to make sure that levels of service would be acceptable, and we feel comfortable and confident that it's not an issue. And I hope that development along Broadway increases traffic volumes by 25%, because that means that Broadway is coming back.
I'm a pediatrician, my name is Catherine Nolan. I'm a pediatrician, and I've seen lots of young cyclists on Broadway that have terrified me. Young cyclists riding against the flow of traffic on the street. So I have great concerns about that. And I think that some of the difference in the numbers is just doing math. If you're reporting 21,000 vehicles a day, 21,000 divided by 24 is 875.
That's only in one quadrant.
But this is 875 is pretty close to the figure of 800 that's being used here. So, and the description of what's happening under the bridge is of approximately 3 lanes now, being 3 lanes after the transformation into a safe passage for cars. When I look at pictures of Broadway where I can't see where the traffic is supposed to go, I have great concerns about safety. And I think the issue is less what you do with the leftover space that you get when you create the traffic diet than creating the traffic diet. You create that and you get safe flow that is double the speed in terms of actual getting from place to place. Then if you don't want something safe for children in that extra space, then I think that's worth talking about. But we need the traffic diet to make the road safer and to let the traffic flow more smoothly, is how it looks to me.
Thank you, Kathy. And I just might add, the accident data indicated that there were 12 bicycle accidents reported along the corridor from 2010 to 2013 in that 3-year period.
I'd like to say something about, let's say, the elimination of the parking. And my name is Mark Riker. I was a building inspector for the last 35 years. I retired last year. So I was the zoning officer and the building inspector. And in my time, we renovated Broadway a couple of times. We rejuvenated it. And I remember when I started in the zoning, we didn't have a requirement for off-street parking. We put it in there so the planner could regulate businesses coming to the city. Well, what we did is we regulated out to the malls. And Broadway, you're going to see probably 30 stores empty. And elimination of parking is a no. Now, I don't know all your traffic studies, and that's not my builder. But I can tell you what you should do. You take a blank piece of paper, put a line down the middle, and one side you put a plus, and the other side you put a minus. Your elimination of parking, you put it where you think it should be. It's probably a minus. Now, what you should do with the zoning ordinance in the city of Kingston, if you've got federal money coming in, we did it, community development behind Frank's Bar on Broadway, there we put parking behind these buildings. We had money, community development had this money, revenue sharing money coming in, and we talked to the owners and they put parking. We had a shared. Now, when you look at your zoning, I don't know, Mr. Doyle might tell you, is there a permitted use for parking? Is that a permitted use in the city of Kingston? That somebody privately, if I wanted to build a parking lot?
The short answer is yes and no.
Yes and no. Well, no, we can't. And I can't build a parking lot.
The interesting thing, though, is that we did do counts on all the private lots. And I think John wants to talk to that.
No, no.
Well, okay, so here's what you should have. You should have some modification of your zoning to allow private people to put parking in, to assist them through some kind of government program. I'm not trying to criticize you or condemn you for what you're doing, but I think you got to think positive here. To eliminate parking is a no-no. Help these businesses establish parking through our local zoning, through the planning office, and get parking along Broadway behind the buildings or alongside of the buildings. And I don't know any other way to say it, but bike lanes, or maybe it's a good thing, it might be timely the wrong time. Parking is more of a primary an issue that you should be addressing.
Well, let me put it in context of the study. As the TAC has recommended at this point, you're absolutely on point with phase 2. And if you look at the TAC recommendation, what they're saying is, do phase 1, do phase 2 after the city's figured out the parking issues around phase 2. So you're absolutely right. You're absolutely in line with what the Technical Advisory Committee has said. When the high school gets relocated and the city addresses the parking issues on that section, then goes phase 2. So you're right.
Let me respond to you a little bit too. I've been around the city, I rode around the block a couple times, 35 years. And I can tell you if you have a Broadway corridor that's got some problems and we need to do it. Okay. If you look at things, what you should do is Clinton Avenue is a wide street up to Franklin Street. You should have a bridge going over the railroad tracks to the high school, all the hospitals are over there, and that should be one of your priorities. Maybe not today, in the future, maybe 10 years from now, you should be looking at taking some of the traffic away. Maybe have your bike lane, but you should have a long-range plan and a bridge over there. But you've got an underpass that floods, whether you know it. And not only floods, the sewage comes up in the water. So you've got a biohazard. And you're building 65 apartments on Cedar Street, and you've got a chance you could flood the underpass with sewage. It may sound good. Stewards are going with that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Questions?
I don't know, but it should be.
Thanks, Frank, resident. It's a tie-in to design, but I'm going to keep it to concept here. I noticed that the planning for the sidewalks, bluestone, possible replacement of bluestone. I just wondered if you're doing the necessary studies to retain the bluestone and keeping Midtown, the redesign of it, having the historical character that ties into the stockade. So, I don't know how old that bluestone is, or what you're doing to retain the historical value of the city of Kingston in the redesign, and I think it would happen in your statistics, etc.
Well, the city did because we're a certified local government, we did have some funding to do a bluestone study. If you went to the City of Kingston Economic Development page, in plans, you'd be able to see, you could look at the bluestone study that we did. It included Broadway. So it looked at existing conditions there. The other thing is that Green Peterson, the engineering firm that's coming on next, is going to be meeting with the Heritage Area Commission on December 2nd to start the dialogue about exactly this question. Bluestone there is historic fabric here. We want to maintain that, but it's also more expensive material. Some places maybe want it. Some people may say, well, we don't want it in other places. We need to sort that out, so there's a lot of dialogue around that. But historic attributes of the city are so important. That's economic development, maintaining that historic fabric. So it's a very good point, and it is something that will be addressed.
And the plan does have a recommendation that bluestone be one of the elements for the streetscape improvements. At each location it would be selected based on, need, condition, etc. But it's in the plan as a recommendation.
With the establishment of a bike lane, will a bus, cab, or vehicle be allowed to pull up curbside to pick up or let someone out of the vehicle in this bike lane to go to one of the establishments on Broadway?
The buses will be provided bus stops, similar to what they are now in most locations, east of Hoffman Street in the eastbound direction. The bus stops will be on the far side of the intersection in the travel lane, so buses will stop in the travel lane.
What if they wanted to get off earlier?
I'm sorry?
What if they wanted to get off the bus prior to that place?
Well, the bus stops are designated at convenient intervals.
What about a cab?
A cab will have to stop where it's legally permitted to stop.
Are they permitted as a bike lane?
They're not permitted to stop in a bike lane, is the answer.
They're not meant to stop at bike lanes?
No.
That prohibits a rider from getting off at his or her stop where they choose to get off.
It depends on the alternate that they select at the end of the day. If it's the bikeway, the two-lane bikeway, that's inside the parking lane, so there's no way that a bus or a cab can get to it. They have to stop outside and park cars like they do today.
So that would be leaving a person off in the middle of the road.
If the bike lanes are traditional bike lanes, then they'll stop in the travel lane like they do now to let somebody off. Or if there's a space in the parking, they'll pull in there like they do now.
Well, I'm a little concerned about elderly people, handicapped people who need to be let off at that particular place, and now they can't be. That's what you're proposing?
I don't see it as a significant change in whether you...
I see it as a very big, significant change. I have another question about the trees. Who maintains them?
The city ordinance is, what's the city ordinance? Street trees are maintained by the city, aren't they?
They're maintained by, yes,
I think the city maintains street trees in Kingston.
Because there are many places where trees obscure the vision of signage, brush goes haywire and scratches the vehicles.
Yeah, the area between the curb and the sidewalk is maintained by whoever the real estate is in front of that, including the trees.
I've just been told I was incorrect. The trees are the maintenance responsibility for the sidewalk area from the curb to the building is the property owner. Is that correct? Okay.
I'm sure I misunderstood, but they said they were going to relocate the high school.
Relocate where the high school drop-off is. That they're going to rotate, my understanding is that the access to the high school will not be on Broadway. It'll be on, what's Andrews? No, O'Reilly, I think. And the school board told us that when we talked to them. So right now the drop-off in front of Broadway, in front of the city hall, right up here.
You tell the students that.
Which is a little scary. Well, we don't know, I guess they won't get in there.
Yeah. There's no change to the streetscape proposed in front of the high school for phase one.
And that is a phase 2, yeah.
I'd like to ask if the study included with those 12 bike accidents in a 3-year period, what the age of the people riding the bikes were, and were they wearing bike helmets? And there's a state law with New York that age 14 and under is required to wear a helmet, and if they don't, then a fee of $50 should be imposed. And was that looked at in the study? Also, throughout New York State, separate entities of counties make its age no difference that they have to wear a helmet. And I just want to know, with the bike lanes, are those rules going to be in effect with New York State law?
New York State law will be in effect. The accident data does report the age of those involved. Off the top of my head, I don't know what the ages were. I don't believe it reports whether they had a helmet on at the time or whether they were found.
You were talking about with the bike lane.
You were talking about with the bike lane. I really appreciate what you were saying. With the elderly, also, you have Dr. Esposito's office. You're going to have a bike lane, which is down the street from Monkey Joe's or the hot dog place. You have a doctor's office right there. What about parking? I know he has a parking lot, yes, but there is street parking for us to go to the doctor. Just what are they going to do for that?
Right. I believe that area is in phase 2, so the goal is to have the city study the parking demands and parking activities in that area and come up with a plan to accommodate parking activity, and when they come up with that plan, then to implement phase 2.
Are we going to be notified when that plan comes up so we can come in and speak?
I would presume so, right, Dennis? Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for all your efforts and great work. I think there is still some real confusion about phase 1 and phase 2. The underlying parking concern that's been voiced very vigorously by some, I think I certainly hear you, but I think phase 1 is the longest section of Broadway, and if I'm correct, you're proposing losing 12 or 13 parking spaces. So I think some clarity and understanding of all, maybe you can clarify. Phase 1 is what's in play now. Phase 2 is a later proposal that awaits the completion of high school construction and awaits a further study on parking. But I think if we can somehow get everybody to really understand what phase 1 is and how that's moving forward and what its impacts are, I think that's important. I think the second thing, to address a couple people's concerns about taxis and stopping and starting on Broadway, it's always an issue. I mean, I come up and down Broadway. As we all know, on the western section, just making sure I have my east and west correct, you sort of have a superhighway. You have 2 lanes in each direction where people are competing vigorously to get ahead of someone else, or if someone's going to turn, somebody's trying to get in another lane to avoid that. With a dedicated turn lane, that doesn't happen anymore. We have a lane of traffic in either direction. If there's an empty parking space, a cab can still pull into that parking space just like it can today. I mean, we're still going to have ostensibly the same amount of parking on the western part of Broadway. We're still going to have the same environment where there's a lane of traffic in either direction, and if someone needs to stop, they'll have to pull off in order to do that. I'm not sure there's a whole lot of difference from what is happening today, but I'm not sure that you've clearly presented that, and I think a lot of the data, which I've been reading and I'm happy to understand, but there's a lot of people where the data is getting a little bit more confusing than what the reality is.
Okay, thank you. So, not to take up too much more of your time, the phasing primarily applies to the type of bike lane developed. The underlying plan, which is the redevelopment of the corridor with traffic signals, improvements to the sidewalks, new lighting, improvements to the landscape features, and placemaking, is all proceeding as a unified project down as far as I think is Vauxhall. That's where the grant funds apply to. The phasing comes in